out, it doesn't really work. So the Grange Co-op is an example where it's a commercial operation. They lease farm equipment to farmers that are involved. They have, not only the farm equipment, but they also have the capabilities. If you're growing wheat or corn or any of that, they have the connections to get your crop processed. If you are a small farm, if you're growing 6 acres of wheat, you're gonna need 2 acres of storage. And unless you have that extra 2 acres of storage somewhere, you either have to run it quick or a lot of that stuff goes away. So to be able to share storage capabilities and drying capabilities and all these different things across a network of people is really the only way that this can work. And that's how co-ops, in my understanding, how co-ops work in the past. What the highest crop is that we have right now. So when we talk about farmers down south with thousands of acres, you gotta start looking at, right now it's easy because they get subsidized to grow corn or they get subsidized to grow soy. So they could sit back, get a check and not really have to do anything because the government is paying them to not grow these different things. That's easy for some, but as we're moving forward, there's new farmers, and a lot of those farmers that have been going by the subsidy market are the ones that are phasing out, because they can't keep up. The they're reducing those subsidies. People aren't buying corn and high fructose and soy and all that stuff like they used to. The dairy farmers in Pennsylvania are losing their shirts. And this is one exact product that can be implemented into an already organized dairy cooperative. They have these around the country where small dairy farms that were getting pushed out by the big Umpqua farms and all these big milk producers, they partnered up and made their own cooperative. And now they are competing with the big guys. They have their own brand, and they're just right there competing with the big guys, sharing all the resources, sharing all the equity. This is, for the cooperative model, here are some models that I've identified that you can structure the co-op around so that you get the tax benefits, but also you get the revenue generation model that's built in to these type of organizations. And so once you start, everyone here is a 501c3, but you look at it, there's up to 20-something 501c designations. We just have to see what they are. And when it talks about agricultural and farmers and cooperative businesses, the tax code's already written for us right here. We just got to follow it. We need to organize some type of business or collaborative or cooperative around these principles to utilize this to the fullest. So we're talking about how we're going to get money from the government. They give money to this all the time. For one, some of these down here, I even made it. You don't pay taxes on the equipment that the cooperative buys. So the cooperative is going to buy a $400,000 piece of equipment. There's 15 farmers that are part of it. They don't pay taxes on any of that. They still get to utilize that resource. They can pay into it with their cooperative fees. So collectively, they'll raise the $400,000. But by purchasing it through this organization or organizational structure, then you're saving all that tax money, and you're opening yourselves up to maybe donations and what a 501c designation offers to receive public funds, things like that. So a crowdsourcing model of a highly revenue generation. I'm trying to figure out how exactly to say that, but a way to cooperatively organize around a money generator. These are some of the equipment pieces that you'll need for all of this. Is all for textiles processing. This is what I was talking about. Anything around you that you can't eat and that's not glass. can be made out of hemp.
Doing processing all of that yourself.
Not myself.
You know,
Under the cooperative, absolutely.
Get it to everybody together, do all the textiles in-house.
All of it,
Oh,
all
okay.
of it. And have if the cooperative is a statewide cooperative, so be it.
So we can just send some over here, y'all take care of that.
Exactly.
Bring it all back together.
One of the things about hemp is once you start transporting it over 200 miles, the cost benefits start to reduce. So it's beneficial to set these up regionally. Therefore, you're propping up local economic models.
And you got jobs.
You got jobs, and we're all under the same auspice. So therefore, it's like the collective bargaining. So we have all of these people all around the state that are all vested into this one idea. When we go to the state, when we go to these different financial organizations, we have all of these, the people behind us, so they're looking at us going, all right, you're not just making this up. You actually have the buy-in of the people that we need you to see have the buy-in.
Pelletizer animal feed, is that hemp is feed?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Hemp is the only, correct me if I'm wrong, the only crop that I know that is food, fuel, fiber. What was the other one? Medicine.
Shelter.
Yeah, so fiber, shelter. So it's the only crop that we know that can hit all of those. It's an animal feed and a human and people. It has high protein, lots of omega fatty 3 acids when we get into the seeds. Not CBD oil. CBD oil, that's totally different.
You're talking about the meat side of seed.
Exactly. That is highly nutritious. It's a superfood on the real. And that's very expensive. You go to Whole Foods right now, you'll probably buy, it's $20 a pound for those little hemp seeds. So it's...
Is there any reason why, it seemed like all the business models were nonprofit?
Where?
The 501c?
These are not nonprofit.
Yeah, the first one, he mentioned the first one.
These are not nonprofit. No.
Those are not nonprofit?
Mm-mm. They are for-profit. They are non-tax. You are allowed...
That's why they're into the 501c.
Yeah, exactly. Because they're non-taxed. Exactly. Only C3 is nonprofit. The rest of them, C6, Chambers of Commerce. Those guys aren't nonprofit. You gotta pay dues in the Chamber of Commerce. They are?
Yeah.
Yeah, those are
Yeah,
not, they're not charitable.
Yeah, like that's what National 501c, there's a few that they're still, they're authorized to do different kinds of things. So
Okay.
donations are not necessarily deductible, but they are nonprofit in that, like an individual or group can't privately profit and use it.
Right.
They have to use the money for the-
Right. Okay, so in nonprofit sense, yes, there. Not any individual can benefit. It has to go back to the members of the group.
And I asked that because I thought the second part was like, to be able to use this money
Mm-hmm.
for moving into the marijuana, the cannabis market, but that might have
But if
some
everybody
restrictions.
collectively agrees, then.
It's just a shifting of the business model. It's really just a shifting of what seed you put in the ground. That's all it is.
Can I add one thing also? And you can overlap, so you can have more than one, right? So like, you can have a 501c3 and a 501c5. That's one example. Yeah, okay.
No, my
And then the
question was-
C3 allows you to get those charitable donations.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
My
Gotcha.
question is more to how you'll be able to use the funds once made,
Mhm.
right?
Mm-hmm. They would have
Your
to,
freedom to use those funds any which way you want or not.
they have to be,
That's more what my question is
Right.
kind of going to.
and they're all of these, the fine print says any profit has to go back into the organization.
Well,
Has to go back into, right?
So that is the 501c.
Okay.
521A is good because it does allow for patronage, which means as I'm patroning or as I'm giving money into the co-op, I can get it back.
Yes.
Whereas the other ones, no, I don't think that.
Right, you're just a part of this and you can utilize the resources. Here you can actually get money back. I just heard about that 521A
So
one.
that one's really.
That's one that you add to any of these other ones.
And they can raise capital as an exemption.
if the
Thank
goal-
you.
Right, for the goal of.
That's
being able
awesome.
to finance the other, the marijuana part.
See?
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Because I hadn't made that connection of how, because I just figured it'd be a switch over into a new business model. But Thank you.
It's
That's great.
It's an important point for us to be at least gardeners, if not gardener farmers, because that farmer piece.
Yes.
Being a farmer is
Yes.
a key piece of that. None of it means anything if you're not a farmer.
Yes, 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 and that's the whole thing. That's why, if you don't own the property, then being a part of the cooperative will give you that, exactly.
And to throw in another little wrinkle, are you thinking at all about like urban farming, which is becoming something
Yes.
Yes.
big too?
Oh, yeah. We had talked about bringing some of the urban farms in to grow hemp in the city as a protest to the regulations, saying you can't grow hemp in, residential areas. And we're going, all right, watch us. And hit all the community gardens, and we grow to the point, but we don't grow to flower. We only grow to textiles. We don't need to grow to flower. We want to show people how we can make paper and t-shirts and all of that from what you grow outside. Doesn't necessarily have to go to flower and make it that whole thing where the smell and everybody gets all, no. So this is one way to help soften that conversation. And when we talk about reducing the stigma, this is one way to all right, we're talking about the same plant, but now we're talking about something different. And now your brain isn't going, a bunch of stoners sitting around, eating snacks, got it. Oh, this is
Playing PlayStation.
Could you give an example of
Procrastinating.
a shelter?
yes. Real quick, as any farmers in the room, that's the only pesticide you need. That's it. Praying mantis, the only pesticide you ever need. That's it. They'll do them all. Another interesting fact, this is what goes into the story about how to raise money to raise engagement around hemp. The CO2 sequestration ability of hemp is unparalleled. The way that it's able to clean the air, to remediate the soil, is unparalleled with the crops that we have in the speed that they grow and the amount that they absorb. And then from that, we take that and we can store it in a wall, which we're taking all that CO2, we're putting it into a wall material. We now have a negative carbon building material that is pulling carbon and storing it away for 200-300 years.
Do you see the ability to access farmer credits? with that?
Absolutely. That farmers right now can sell those credits. Yep. We're working on a program there's one farm in Pennsylvania that set up some type of sensors, and they're actually trying to track how much they're getting around their farm so they can, and once it works, we're going to be implementing it in some of these other farms.
What about the release of that carbon?
Only when you burn the house. And since hemp you can't burn, it's just going to be there. It's going to be there. Yeah, hemp doesn't burn. That's one of the things. It's fire resistant. So as a building material, what's the benefit of that? 1 inch will give you a 1 hour fire break. Most of the houses that some of the partners that we've been working with, 12 inches on a minimum. So that gives you a 12-hour fire break. There's probably one house that burned down, a week in Philly. I see it on the news. So what we like to do, what my company, Eastern Hemp, is doing is, here's some of those building applications. So here's a hempcrete wall. What it is cast in place. So these boards.
Is it like fiber?
This
Fiber
is
board?
this is
Hemp fiber board?
It is hemp fiber board, but it's not fiber board. What you're talking about, fiber board like that. It's poured in place. Like, has anyone seen a straw? What is it? Straw cob house?
Oh, the
Yeah,
straw
actually,
Cob
bale.
house?
Yeah, the straw
Yeah, the
bale.
cob house. Yeah, and the straw bale house.
Yeah.
It's kind of that same way. So you build the empty cavity, and then you fill it in, pack it in, let it dry, move it up. So that's how this was made in layers. You can kind of see the striations of how we put it in.
That's all hemp packed down?
That's all hemp, 12 inches thick.
Nice.
And that is the interior and the
And that's
exterior
waste
wall.
But
Okay,
we consider
you
waste
can
product.
call it waste product if you're growing for flour.
Oh, okay.
I'm
So
saying that this is my
pour
crop.
that.
Exactly, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
Mixing with some of the resins that we have, I've been able to press it into different composite structures, so you can use this stuff for cars, the inside of car panelings and doors, and one of the, Sharon knows this better than I, one of the first cars off the electric line was a Model E, Thomas Ford, and it had hemp door panels,
Right,
hemp composite.
right. Yeah, and even the current BMW, the BMW is one of the only vehicles that has it now. Unfortunately, we don't have enough hemp grown in the United States that we can actually supply BMW with the material that they need. Because they need it like 5 years out. So everything that they need, we need to multiply that by 5 years. And we don't have it in the United States right now, so they're still getting it from Canada. But the automobile that Oneal was mentioning, the fuel from that was really created by Dr. George Washington Carver Jr. So when we want to look at, somebody in our community,
He's the grandfather.
that took him to the next level, he was the one that did it. I mean, we saw what he did with peanuts, with soy. We barely know what he did because of the stigma of cannabis. We barely know what he did with this. Yeah.
This is kind of the worldview of cannabis. This is where everybody focuses. And I'm gonna just step back.
Small piece.
Yeah, one little
That's
square.
all, and this is hundreds and billions of dollars.
Right. So imagine if the rest of it.
So, Oneal, let me just jump up into the box ahead, food.
Uh-huh.
If we embraced hemp food products, we could reverse diabetes in one generation. You just went up from that THC box to that next box and embrace that from a young age. We could reverse diabetes in our food. Period.
And that's why it's been illegal for 80 years.
She'll tell you.
I'm thinking Sharon and do it.
We tried. We've been doing it for 20 years. We've been selling these products in our stores that will reverse diabetes.
Awesome.
But, what are your food choices?
Yep. And when we grow for the food part, it's not covered under any of the regulations because it's such a low THC account and it has seeds in it.
Can you repeat that?
When you're growing for the food, you skirt a lot of the drug regulations. You then get into the FDA regulations because it's a food. But when you're growing for the foods, you have a plant that's naturally low in THC and it has a high proclivity of seeds, which you don't smoke anyway. And so that's the only illegal part of this plant is that compound right there. Of 109 different compounds, that's the only illegal compound in the whole plant. And that's the one that all the laws are written around. If you can get rid of this, you got this, and you got all this other stuff. But that compound is what the government hates. It's a psychoactive compound.
Can we use it for building materials in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Philadelphia?
Have you come to my store?
Well, okay.
I'm with the Peace Corps.
Oh, okay, all right,
You know,
yeah.
we building our different buildings. and I'm
Right, and I'm actually trying to get
I know,
some, for the Peace Corps, but we actually have a wall in our store that's made of hemp bricks. Yeah.
So no, you can't use it as a building material in Philadelphia? I mean.
Okay. So that's
Right?
that's a loaded
That's
question.
the Illinois.
So
That's the
It's
Don't
like-
tell
Illinois.
nobody.
That's a highly regulated.
So when you're building something, it's not regulated in the building codes right now. So it would be covered under a really nice painting in your house. Decor, decorative, insulative. That's the way it would have to be looked at. So say we redid all of these walls in here, they would just be considered decorative, insulated walls, non-load bearing. So we'd still have to leave all the studs, all the wood stuff in, but then we could take all of this drywall and insulation and all that crap. Exactly. You don't need the drywall or insulation with hemp.
So you only need the structural.
You only need the sticks, the bones, and that's it.
need to sticks, but I think another point that he was making earlier is a lot of this regulation around things like insulation, like its R value or how much heat or cold it lets in or out, the burn factor, how fast it burns or doesn't burn, is part of the lack of regulation. And I don't know if some of this will ever get it in the challenge that it brings to the materials that already exist. Because it's such a better material than all of the materials that already exist. I doubt that it would get into that.
They have been.
Right.
They have been.
Building codes.
I mean, for 80 years they've been fighting it. They know what the
Building
deal
codes
is.
are important, right?
They are.
Yeah.
They're also very political and.
Yes, like at the same
people
time,
of color and stuff.
again, I'm actually gonna say it because not everybody was here earlier. I'm from the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and it's very similar to the South Bronx at a certain point. Like landlords and slum landlords burn shit because they could get the insurance, and they also didn't take care of nothing.
Yeah.
So yeah. So basically, like where I'm from and literally was born, everybody in the building took care of what it was, including like if you have a leak, fix it. Now, if the city came and said, "Oh, we want to make sure the building is up to code," in order to claim those buildings, they could have. What happened instead was some older white men decided to help support tenants through organizing, and at a certain point in the 90s, UHAB was created, and the city agreed to shift those buildings into limited equity cooperatives. So it basically, a lot of them became housing co-ops, and then it also maintained the affordability of those spaces. It made it really hard, even to this day, for anybody to take over. So I was born in the building in '78, and my family still owns the apartment. And the place where,
Which is rare in New York.
Yeah.
which is,
Wow.
especially on the Lower East
And
Side.
it's super
So that's
expensive.
one thing. The other
It's
thing,
super expensive.
yeah, like I can't afford to live in my neighborhood. So, unless I want to live on the couch. So in the South also, with insulation and everything else, right now we're going through a process of renovating, and I can't believe how many old houses don't have insulation. And with the shift in the weather, it makes sense for when it was hot most of the year,
Yeah.
and now it makes it difficult, especially when folks, don't have heat. That's
The central heat.
yeah, HVAC systems, and on top of it, the water pipes are busting.
They're old.
Wow.
The reason why I'm feeling really adamant about it is because in most cases, there's a give and take. There's pros and cons. We have to weigh what it is, and we have to make sure that we have the people that have the different skills, that we work together. Because like I'm looking at Russell. Russell could actually build some stuff, and I only know how to like repair it. And we have to have that so that we're taking care of each other. And instead of using the capitalist model, we're like, oh, we can do this. Oh, we can do that. Oh, we can figure out how to get around the corner. That we end up becoming similar to the oppressors that we're talking about. So I really wanted to say that, and then I'll hold some more of the sacrament and the medicine that I also see in the THC section for later.
Yeah, because you do have a fireside chat with
Yes.
with Russell.
I'm taking this
Yeah.
back. I landed the plane. It's very exciting.
Cool. I'm done.
Oh.
Yeah, that was it.
Seriously?
I'm done.
I was looking for more. It
Oh, well.
was going on. It was going on and on.
All right, hold up. All right. I'm lying. I'm just kidding. So somebody did want to see some of the building materials.
Yes.
So let me.
Man, we can get this slide presentation at some point.
All right. So this is the circular economic model that hemp can lend to. This is a true circular economic model. A lot of people are saying circular economy right now, and they mean vertical integration, and that's not the same thing. Circular economy means we're taking the waste and turning it into something of use for a raw material, and that cycle continues and continues and continues. Yeah.
You had mentioned urban farming and then communities. So what type of, like soil and stuff? I mean, literally like a backyard? Like, does it depend on
I mean, I know they're growing hemp in West Virginia.
What's a nickname for hemp?
Weed, it's a weed, it grows in anywhere.
It's gonna go. The most popular CBD strain right now was found on the side of the road in Oklahoma. This stuff grows wild.
What's that side?
Cherry wine. It's called cherry wine. You don't want to mess with it. But so these are some ceiling panels that we can do out of it. These are some of the properties of this material once we work it into our shapes and our forms or whatever.
So were these just hung like, and they were considered, this is decorative, this is decorative?
That it's decorative. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We couldn't really do anything more. This was more of an art installation,
Okay.
more so than anything else. They just wanted to show what these panels could look like.
So art installation.
Yeah, and that could be our installation in your house. So here's a freestanding wall. This was the drywall prototype that we had built. And some wall panels like acoustic tilings for music studios or whatever. We've done a few of those. We also have some flower pots.
That was made out of hemp,
Those tiles.
What are you coloring that with? Just
It's-
dye?
Yeah, it's an iron oxide it's a powder. So
Oh, okay.
this one comes from oxidizing magnesium. I think you get that blue and you get a turquoise.
Are
And
those soft materials or hard? Are they a little solid?
I wish I probably should have brought some with me. No, they're solid. They're solid. I did not. Yeah, I didn't even think about bringing a sample.
Conference in Philly in September.
The big ass pot sale.
Oh yeah, there's that too. I'm selling those there.
Yeah, big ass pot sale.
She said, how did you color the tile? Same way?
The same way. Yeah. This is a dry mix. All of these are dry mix. The hemp and then the herd is a bone resin dry mix, and then the paints are powdered oxidation. And so we just mix it with water. These are $10.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because I'm selling them as conversation pieces. I want people to take them home, put them in their office, put them in their car, talk about it.
Bigger box too, like?
No, I haven't done the big, just the small ones. Yeah, the bigger stuff is the panels and the wall stuff and floorboards, things like that.
And are those fire resistant or fire retardant? You said it doesn't burn.
Fire. Okay, resistant or retardant.
Retardant is slow.
Please, yeah, tell me.
Means it won't catch.
Okay, what's
Resistant won't catch on fire.
got it?
Retardant means that it'll catch on fire, but it'll burn slow.
Okay, resistant. It will not catch on fire. It has a zero flame spread
It'll
ability.
still get that black burn.
It'll black and go into.
Charcoal.
Yeah, it'll
But it
exactly.
won't go up in the flames.
Exactly.
Can I interject? Because kids' clothes, especially babies and infants, are retardant. And they're required to be, and so clearly there's chemicals in them. But
Absolutely.
still, yeah.
But that's retardant.
And when
Going back to it catches, but it so you still don't want your clothes to catch fire.
So,
And you don't want your child to either, but you still have to.
Right.
You still have to
so the retardant,
stop it.
the retardant will burn and it'll get hot.
Okay.
Rock and roll, rock and roll.
The resistant means like I can hold a flame up there and it'll just show.
All right. So the video that I have a 1-inch panel. Did it with Sharon, holding it with a blowtorch.
And
It didn't push through a 1-inch. 30-second live burn. And then I made a little square. It's like a 2-inch by 2-inch square. Took a video of her standing on it. Just the compression strength of this stuff is amazing.
So you didn't get burned. You didn't get burned? He's on the other side of the
The one side is all black,
Right.
but the heat, there was no heat transfer.
Right. It didn't catch, not like wood or.
Oh, it did not collapse. That little cube that you stood on,
Right, no.
that didn't collapse.
Does it conduct electricity?
That's a good question.
I'm gonna have you sign an NDA before I answer that. I would love to, yeah. How would I don't know how I do that.
Yeah, it's a list, it's a list we pass around.
So if anybody's got, back to my first question, anybody got $20 million? This, I could use $20 million for.
What is this?
This is my project plan. So to me, getting to patent approval. I'm looking for, my funding round. I'm already created the business plan, the prototypes. I've identified the research pathways. Now we're getting the product implementation.
So these are all things that you.
That's what my company is working. This is my company project timeline right now. Yeah.
Right at the bottom of the mark, man, I got you.
Appreciate you.
Have you thought about community finance or crowdfunding?
Community financing, yes. They don't like hemp. They don't like agriculture. Cannabis scares them away.
What community?
All the small banks that I've went to, CDFIs, that's exactly what we're talking about, this cooperative.
That's what we're here for.
That's exactly what we're here for, because this is how we do this.
So I'm asking about, I'm an attorney in the security crowdfunding space.
Oh.
Co-op is one way, but even where, say for instance, I don't know, as a third party, I'm not a member of the co-op, but I can give you the money and capacity, that's the thing. So then I'm gonna wait for her over time.
Yeah, I can offer that. That's part of some of the Series A and B, yeah.
Did you already raise money?
Yeah, but I haven't closed it. I've raised about $30,000 so far.
Additional sources?
Friends and family,
Okay.
yeah.
So, and we're gonna let that conversation continue offline because we wanna introduce, Russell and, she's taking notes on it.
Saki always taking notes. Saki always taking notes.
Right, so
I'm taking notes because
Saki's notes
I
are
don't know,
always.
like so much information that we're sharing here. So, we are just grateful that you all are asking these questions. and making this input.
I'm not gonna use it. I'm putting it here so I don't have to jump back and forth.
Anybody who wants to, fit Oneal's presentation, and we have a sheet for those people that wanted the presentation, for earlier. You need to stick that somewhere.
Does it conduct electricity?
I think we can probably stick it under here. Yeah, I think we can probably stick it. Well, I thought. It seemed like
I can hold it.
It seemed like it worked for a minute. Okay.
I'm getting it together.
So, yeah, it seemed like it worked for a minute.
It's okay, you can put it on the floor, I'm gonna open it when it's time.
Okay.
And
Can we
then.
still say this thing is falling off? We'll make a way. So that has fallen off, and we'll leave that.
We got it, Saki.
Yeah, so we'll leave that right there.
Okay, alright. I don't wanna jump around too much, but I do wanna piggyback on some of what we just talked about.
So thank you again, Russell and Saki, for continuing this conversation. We need everybody's attention on this next conversation that we're getting ready to have with, again, Saki and Russell, and they'll get started and introduce themselves, and then we'll bring everybody back except me for more questions and just again recap and hear from everyone again. So, we're so appreciative of you spending your time here to learn more about this, because we know that this is a conversation that we don't have in our living rooms, well, most people. And so we're glad that we're able to have this conversation with everyone today.
So just a quick introduction. Can we do some quick introductions, just quickly? So my name is Russell Shoatz III, and I work closely with Sharon, and also I was the urban marketing director for High Times. I am a partner in RCC, that's the Revolutionary Cannabis Collective. We have the first two black-owned dispensaries in New York, Get the BK and Legacy. And that's my introduction to this space, just the cannabis world. I recognize my bio was the longest one on there. It didn't say anything about cannabis at all.
On the same page. We're on the same page.
anything but cannabis in my life. That is who I am in this space, but I come in it as the son of a revolutionary, of a political prisoner and a Panther, who passed away recently, and I look at a lot of the issues through the lens of liberation. Almost everything I look at through the lens of liberation, and how does this question, or whatever we're talking about, bring us to a liberatory space, even finance. So this intersects finance. And so how does the finance bring us any liberation, if it does at all? And those type of questions. But that's me as a person, and that's how I enter and engage the cannabis space. But I am a super firm believer that we need finance in this space to bring a lot of our liberation dreams to fruition.
Yeah, so, me and Russell go back a long time, and I'm always like, is he from Philly or New York? Because I enter into what Russell described as, his father and this liberation movement, particularly coming out of the New African independence movement, and or you could say the Black radical left revolutionary left, in 2002. And so while Russell grew up in it specifically because of family, my parents and even my grandparents, except for my grandfather maybe a little bit, weren't a part of those movements here in the United States or in Haiti. And then at the same time, I'm Haitian. And so that revolutionary spirit of we will do whatever it takes, Malcolm said by any means necessary. In Haiti, they were like, we don't have nothing to lose. And they were literally, Haiti was actually the expectancy of an enslaved African in Haiti was the least out of the whole Caribbean and even here. So that's in me, it's in my blood. And I knew it, I was thinking of and doing things. And then I call my activeness, and I don't like to use the term when I became conscious, because I feel like I was conscious based on who I was and who I grew up with. Another example, my mom and my dad, so my partner calls my mom a Haitian hippie. My mom came here when she was 14. She got together with my father, who's an artist, and a lot of different things, who's from St. Louis originally, right? And so he goes to New York, and he basically decides that he'd rather live in New York and be what I call a starving artist than go back to St. Louis and do architect engineering type stuff. And so my dad introduced my mom to a lot of things like Angela Davis's autobiography. And so fast forward to me being in, high school? When Spike Lee came out with the Malcolm X movie, before the movie came out, I was like, oh, I gotta quickly read the autobiography. And my mom was like, oh yeah, and took off the shelf Angela Davis's autobiography and was like, read that too. So I pulled this out because when I start getting excited and I have what I want to talk about, plus what has been going on starts happening, I can jump all over the place.
Yes.
I say
yes.
the Brooklyn spot, because the spot is like, it can be a art exhibit, it can be a space where there are events, and you can also come and purchase, whatever goods you like. I also, cannabis, in different forms. I also actually wanna share that I feel like I'm the least knowledgeable in the bunch of us who are doing this block today, because I don't smoke. And I'm serious. And I was drawing out the question that got answered earlier because I drew out, like, we know there's THC and there's CBD. I feel like a lot of people know that by now because of how long there's been the debate and also commercials, and now it's everywhere, right? And so it was helpful because my question was like, we say what we're doing right now is medical marijuana, right? But it's medical cannabis,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And then, so to me in my mind, I'm like, there's THC, there's CBD, there's parts of the marijuana, and THC is what gets you high. So people are like, on that. And then also you could go to the doctor, and depending on where you are and who your psychiatrist is, they can be like, we can let you have a little. Now hemp, when you said that, was really important because seeing the eco part of like what hemp is,
Right.
and then highlighting the part where that's where everyone is focusing, and when you visualize it, it's like, bam, THC is in that part. And I wrote down like pretty quickly, simply, hemp, low THC, cannabis, higher. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just in terms of conversation, because
Right,
it's
to
all
make it,
cannabis.
I mean, it's more complicated than that. And at the same time, when I'm talking to people who know way more, in Mississippi, I could be in a room with like 3 different generations, and people still know more about the components of hemp and marijuana, than I do. So, I wrote out earlier when Sharon was talking, because my experience with marijuana kind of felt like the opposite of what she was talking about.
In what context specifically?
So, I was born on my block. My father literally gave birth. It was a blizzard. Might have done that even if it wasn't a blizzard, but it was. So I was like brought into this world with a pup. And for a long time, I didn't share that with anybody outside of like my neighborhood, close friends, because I felt like even though it was normalized in my building, and in my neighborhood, I honestly, as a maybe so many things, not only cooperatives, when we talk about politics and capitalism and white supremacy, when we're talking about our health and well-being, and returning to a lot of the things that our communities, including indigenous peoples here and on the continent, have done for pure necessity slash like, you know, it's not a fad. We still have to be thinking of like how, what is the wholeness, what is the big picture. For me, I have family who smokes and knows how to still go to work. I have a cousin who's involved with Corporation Jackson off and on, and still luckily he's on, who like needs it to be like, stop, detox, know that you can let go. And one of the things he said to me was like, he's dreaming again, because he stopped for a year. So I often, for shorthand, with some of our young folks, I'm like, remember when Biggie said, go get high on your own supply? You might have to have the discipline to do that for a little, or at least, I don't know, do it in your basement, not because you have to, or because you're hiding, or because, you know, you want to separate the business from your pleasure. And in my mind, like Russell said, I'm constantly thinking about security. I'm constantly thinking about COINTELPRO. I'm constantly thinking about how this government, and even, yeah, the U.S. and other countries of power, want us to like trip us up, right? And so, yeah, so I'm sharing that very, very personal story. I don't have a problem with that. I agree with everything that both of you said this morning, and I'm really excited to be here talking about cooperatives and Black cooperatives, because that's what we've been talking about, and that's what led to the inception of CJ, and also this section.
But I want to piggyback on that and say that you kind of glossed over our relationship in the context of the dispensary in BK, but our relationship goes back further than that, obviously, and us being involved in liberation work, but then you guys going to Mississippi and doing that work that a lot of us were invited to do and we didn't. But I say all of that to say that I'm glad that you guys did it, because now we get to come back together in this space and bring those expertise, you know, together. And then we're working on other projects, obviously, that bring those expertise together, you know, again, of indigenous and Black and brown co-ops that are successful nationally coming together. And so what we want to open the floor up, because I just want to talk. I don't want to talk at you guys. And I'm sure you guys have questions, and I want to go back to the conversation that we were having earlier. But one of the things that's important for me is, how do we collectively come together, no matter where we are, you can be here, there, wherever you are, and find revenue streams in the cannabis industry, and figure ways for us all collectively to not just monetize, but also be a part of that chain. Because if you're a part of the chain, you're going to monetize at some point. But one of the things we're big on is owning the means of production, you know. And worst case scenario, we have to get in that somewhere and start to try to muscle for a piece of the chain. And so I feel like cannabis is a great opportunity, and the brother just gave you 11 ways, 11 ways, you know, for this product to work. Please, jump in.
Recap this morning, because I wasn't in the morning.
Sure. Sure.
So we had to fast forward, and so the idea was that Sharon was going to speak, Shekia spoke, and then we were going to have a panel. So all three of us were going to also speak, take question and answers, and then because of how co-ops go, and it
Yeah,
real quick, and then
that's right.
Oneal,
We
because
also
Oneal was like,
we
it's,
wanted Oneal to start this one
Right.
off,
yeah.
so that, you know, because we missed that when we got behind the that one. He didn't get to say anything.
O'Neal actually
I
deferred, he
think
was like,
so.
it's almost 12:30, let's.
I
Yeah,
think
that was
so, that she's asking about like the content.
Oh, you were there.
Oh, yeah, there was,
I think she's asking about the content.
Yeah,
So,
so,
yeah.
okay, so,
There was a health and wellness piece, is that?
so Sharon really
History,
laid,
health and wellness, I would say.
so I would say that Sharon really laid the groundwork for why there was a proposal within the context of Black cooperatives, which is also within co-ops in the United States, that we have this like proposal of a block for all day, right? So it's like, in my mind, Black cooperatives and cannabis. And the title actually that's in the program is Collective Work Solutions for Social and Economic Justice. And then Shekia spoke about her experience
In the
in
regulatory.
the regulatory space of the whole state of Mississippi.
No.
Massachusetts.
Her focus was on equity, and
On
how we
equity?
define equity, the social equity candidates, and how should be developed.
Thank you.
She spoke about that experience.
Yeah.
My question is, how do we have continue? Because it's 2:58 and it's over at 3 o'clock. So how
Yeah.
do we actually like get this together where we can continue these discussions? Like I'm up to, you know, even later on if we all came together, because I think there's a lot to touch on, right? I had fire inside of me when the discussion started, and I was like, well, yeah, I'm hungry too. But I was like, I'm just trying to like engage it, because even thinking about the legislation, like I have a lot to say about that and where Black men fit or don't fit, and I have a problem with them not really fully being included in it. So there's a lot that I like that I feel and that I say, and as a revolutionary, so like how do we continue and learn from y'all and get the information and exchange?
One up, pardon me?
There's one more after this.
No, this is
No, there is.
There's
there is-
another
no.
one, there's another one, and there's a fireside, that's
And,
separate.
I forget the other young lady's name. Not today. I think it's Thursday. There's another
There's
cannabis
another
session,
Thursday,
I think,
but
on
I have-
Thursday.
But just to quickly answer that question,
Yes.
we need to do the networking here now for that, and then, I guess, committee it or whatever and make it happen. Because one of my biggest questions is, what do we get out of this? How do we network to move forward on similar type of questions?
Yeah,
So
so
that's
at
why
3
I invited a
p.m.
couple of you, because we have a working group in New York, but one of the things that struck me is that we need to do this across state.
Yes,
It's
yes.
still a lot for us.
Yeah.
And so you're in my state, and I,
Yeah, and I'm in Mississippi.
So
Oh,
I was,
so-
At 3 p.m., which is right after this, we actually are staying together. Russell is moderating community reinvestment and a call for co-ops, and Oneal, myself, and Shekia
Are on that.
are staying.
on that panel.
We're on the panel.
That's what I asked.
So,
That's today.
So it's now, it's like almost now. It's 2:59. Oh, it's not?
Are you sure it's not Thursday? Because I don't see nothing in there for today.
So, I got it in there.
For free. That is what I'm saying.
Now we're going Thursday.
There's
So
dinner.
you might need to make an announcement, because nobody else knows. Everybody gonna
That's
show
not
up.
the rule.
Yeah.
Bonnie
Everybody's
said it
gonna-
ends at 3.
Okay, so it ends at 3, and that's my bad, because when we did a check-in, we did check in.
We did check in.
Right, but it ain't in here.
But
So
we
what
need to,
Russell said,
but can I have the name of it, please?
yes.
so is it?
Right there.
I have no idea where it is.
No, does it
Okay,
I'm on it.
so, bear with us and me, because I wanna go back to what we were talking
Are
about.
we staying in here?
If you don't mind to hear about the overlap with the 501c and the 5 and all that other stuff, I can share with you how we've done it. Okay. So, are you all? Yes. So, whoever is down, stay in the room for, let's say, 15 more minutes. It's 3:01 right now. And Russell went to check and see what's happening. So for background information,
we're operating off of what was proposed and approved. And one of the reasons why I can be so calm during this process is because I have coordinated and had to be like a Ron, so to speak, for a number of big conferences, including the U.S. Human Rights Network, which dealt with human rights issues within the United States, domestic human rights issues, because a lot of time the United States makes you want to think that human rights is outside there, right? Okay, so we have a few, so funny, I've like shifted up here and little by little, my New Yorkness is coming out more and more. I was in Virginia this past weekend celebrating my man Meryl's 90th birthday. And so, like I left New York and slowly went into the South, and I do make the distinction of the Deep South. As a New Yorker, I'm like, it's the Mason-Dixon line. I went to college here in Baltimore at Goucher outside of Towson. And so, right, little by little, it's like, it's not the same. And then as you move up, I'm sucking my teeth and snapping my hands.
When you say north-south now I get it.
Yeah, and the Carolinas, you know. So Russell can break it down in terms of the independence movement with what the territories are, and there's also like two different versions in terms of what a lot of our ancestors and still our freedom fighters who are alive now determined, although we know that we're on stolen land, the blood, sweat, and tears of our ancestors made the South rich, and folks migrated for different reasons, and then, you know, remigration, or whatever they call about the reverse migration, I feel like started in the 90s. And so a lot of so two different forms of territories are, not Texas. It's Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and then it also can include South Carolina and North Carolina. So the reason why I'm saying that distinction is because they're,
Yeah, what does that mean?
so within the New African Independence Movement, and also within the Republic of New Africa, where folks in Detroit, we were like, we're gonna have a convention, we have a president, we don't recognize the United States as a country, it's colonizing multiple nations in this hemisphere, and so basically, like when I refer to the United States, I refer to it as an empire. And so I don't have a map, but I don't have to talk in that either. And they're splits, they're constantly splits. So for us, and when I talk about us, I understand the South and the United States Civil War, and how the Mason-Dixon line is all the way up here. Maryland and West Virginia and Virginia, Tennessee, Kentucky, even Arkansas, and I usually split Texas in half, because like going for is one thing. In our movement that we're talking about, the South as a territory that we can reclaim and have an independent nation is, you start over here, right? So Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina. I might be missing something. It is.
Florida. Florida's got the best beaches.
Florida, North Florida, right? Because
Most Florida.
all of Florida. I'm Haitian. You go down to Miami, it's like a whole nother world, right?
A city in
Yeah. And so the Panhandle, the Gulf, it goes on and on. And so, okay. So one thing when you were talking about raising that money, and I'm like, yes, because one of the slideshows that we use shows how many people know the principles of, like, the co-op principles that come out of Rochdale? Okay, so there's a number of them, and one of them is cooperation amongst cooperatives, which is really important because we've been able to use that in the South in terms of the credit unions, like Hope Credit Union. So when there was like a fire of questions coming at you. I wanted to be like, what about the credit unions?
I've talked to them.
And so, yeah, and some credit unions, are like commercial credit unions, and we can talk more about that. But cooperation amongst cooperatives may mean that within Pennsylvania, you and what you presented, and my question was, is it a co-op? It doesn't even have to be. Like, you grow and you can get there, right? That amount of money doesn't have to all fall on your shoulders, because there's so much happening in Pennsylvania and particularly in Philly already. And so for Cooperation Jackson, our motto has been very based on Mondragon. And they have additional, Mondragon is in Spain.
I just want to mention, because it might be available on recording, St. Mary's University.
Uh-huh.
Did a 2-day course on cooperation among cooperators.
Okay.
Mondragon,
Yeah, so I'm gonna take it a step further. Cooperation Jackson has more than the Rochdale principles of cooperatives, and although we understand the history and we're aligned with that, Mondragon, because of it being in the Basque region of Spain, has a long independence movement, and I just shared with you all what the independence movement has been real quick in what states. And so they have additional principles that we believe are important, because that is what helps to set not us apart for funding, but our understanding that capitalism has to go along with other things, right? So there are principles that we have that hopefully in 50 years to 100 years, my kids and anybody else, while I'm, here or old or gone, can maintain that. And for folks who were in the lunch when the woman was talking about New Orleans, she was able to talk about Dent and then his son later. It was his son, right? So we, are talking about the struggle being long-term. It's not a race, it's not a sprint, it's like, cross-country. And what we're doing now is our contribution to what our ancestors, like I mentioned earlier, I did a quote from W.E.B. Du Bois, and then also a quote from Dr. Bullard. And Dr. Bullard is like serendipitous, this happens constantly, and I'm like, when she was talking about Cooperation New Orleans and going back into that history, she mentioned Dillard a whole lot of times. Dr. Bullard comes out of Dillard and was at Dillard. He's in Texas now. And a lot of people know the term environmental racism. Dillard, and I'm forgetting her name, she's also fabulous and still at the Dillard University. Low-key, along with a couple of other folks, coined that term. And they're still around. And so the quote that I have, I can share. Right, it's environmental justice, but environmental justice can mean, Greenpeace and other things. And so the coin environmental racism was coined, and, now it's like popular language. A lot of people know it, but there was a struggle for folks to even say, yes, there is a layer of environmental, human rights violations that are also based on race. The Jackson Rising book, I wish I had some. I didn't bring them. Yeah, so, go ahead.
She's asking for the name of the book. She's asking what.
Yeah, so it's Jackson Rising. And we have a new one coming out, which is Jackson Rising Redux.
When you send the email, maybe you can.
When I send the email?
I'll send the email. Are we taking?
Yes, we have it right.
You have it? Okay.
Wait, I'll start one for you.
Order them.
Yeah.
Yes. And if you request it, it can be for free. You also can Google it, and you can order it It's on Amazon. You can order it from DeRazor Press because that's who we worked with to produce the book.
I just want to say quickly that a big part of
Freedom Farms.
why I'm here is to network directly with you. Also to be very strategic and have very strategic business conversations with you. And when I say that, I don't mean that right here in this moment, but that we do exchange information and we commit to moving forward to a strategic business plan around what I call the 3 R's. Revenue streams, some people say reparations, but I also say restorative justice. Because I think that reparations, a lot of times for the people who I engage, reparations a lot of times lands on them in a way that makes them recoil as opposed to open the wallet. And so when I'm trying to get them to open the wallet, and a lot of times open the wallet looks like, and I'm saying this to you in an educational piece so that you can use this and have these conversations with people in the context of, I like to meet people and I target people who have large swaths of land.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, my low point is like 200 acres. So I target people who have, and they generally don't look like us, but I target them and then I approach them with a restorative justice conversation. I may start it in reparations and then swing it over to, it could be a restorative justice thing. They say, well, what's that? Oh, well, that is when someone like yourself just signs one name, like my name, onto a deed of land with no strings attached to it.
And it has happened, and that's why we also have land in Vermont. So,
What's the third?
Pardon?
What's the third one?
The third one is restorative justice. That is the
So
so
you said
revenue, reparation, restorative
So
justice.
just to be clear, I just need clarification.
Please. Yes.
So
Yes, no problem.
because what I heard,
Yeah,
I'm a teacher, so this is my teacher ear.
Yeah.
So what my teacher ears heard is you simply have a conversation like, look, you got 200 acres and you just need to give me this land so you can feel a little bit better about
Sure.
like you're gifting me this
it's not like you
community
can feel
service.
better. It is a gift.
And they do.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing that when they went to Africa and they handed you a Bible and said, "Hey, come with us." You do the same thing.
So I want to be clear because it's not exactly the same thing. I wouldn't go, like, so the reason why I said, and that's why we have land in Vermont, is because Vermont in particular is a space where you might have a white farmer who, just like a black farmer in Mississippi, has children or no children. No one is about to take over this farm that has cows because cows and cheese is, the farming is dying.
That part is dying
And
now.
that part's dying now.
The ag is changing, agriculture.
Right, agriculture's changing. There is no legacy for him to pass that down to. And whether they completely agree or not, some folks are open to saying, yes, I will do restorative justice / reparations, if you want to call it that, / both indigenous people and black people, right? And so I'll speak for myself. I wouldn't go around in Mississippi having that conversation right away, depending on where I am, right? So like I could have that conversation with some folks who I know are black, like dope allies who still will call themselves, and I may say they're a redneck, but like that is the white members of Cooperation Jackson's job, because we're black center, we're not, anybody in the Mississippi can be a member. Like, y'all need to talk to your people, right? And hopefully, the white and the black farmers who are in the Delta or, across the northern Mississippi, hopefully those white farmers who have struggled as much and have to compete against ag and commercial ag. Like when you said they get subsidized by the USDA, black folks ain't getting subsidized by the USDA.
and poor white farmers aren't either. So if they, and we do the work, and some of that Russell has laid the ground for, with people who are like, and people who are like, hell yeah, then, you know, hopefully poor and working class people will choose not just what their privilege is based on race or based on their gender. They'll choose like what makes the most sense for this planet because we want to keep it going, and what makes the most sense for us to be like, yeah, the 5%, the 1%, hell no. Does that make sense?
So there's a lot of layers, right? Specifically in the context of where you enter the conversation from. So I enter the conversation from, my dad's a Black Panther and a political prisoner, and I'm always going around outside of the choir and preaching to other people, specifically folks with funding and things like that, and saying, we need support. And people will say, well, what does that support look like? And I'll go into that conversation, but more importantly, I just don't do it anywhere. I remember being at EJI's unveiling of their museum, the lynching museum down in Alabama, and I knew that there were going to be a lot of well-off white folks from down south and Alabama and California and from all over the world that were going to come to EJI and be saying, wow, this is really terrible.
What's EJI?
Equal Justice Initiative. Brian, what's his?
I got it. I wanted
Brian
to say
Stevenson,
to break
I'm
it
sorry,
down.
yes. Brian Stevenson, Equal Justice Initiative, responsible for getting a lot of people off of death row. Just Mercy is his movie. What's his name? Played him. Yeah, Just Mercy. This lawyer. So I went down to his thing, whatever. They're unveiling or whatever, because I knew the people who would be there. And so in that process of actually meeting white people with some left politics and some resource, in meeting these people there, I met a woman from California who her org was an org that she's a socialite, she's a white rich socialite, and her thing is to get white rich well-off people to not receive their inheritance, but to give it to other disenfranchised people. And I was like literally blown away, and I was like, oh, I have to have your information. I have to set a meeting. I have to figure out the white people who are not taking their inheritance and giving it to. So it's the same also when we look at Portland and what happened in Portland. So Portland on the West Coast is a more left type of space, and the white people in Portland through the uprising created their own liberated zone. They had a liberated zone there, whatever. People with resources who think like that, we need to be targeting them.
I know there's two black people working at, I think you're Seattle.
I'm sorry.
Is that, and they waived the 25 million and now they are able to give that, yeah.
And so all of these people we need to target, and we need to have the conversations with them from this standpoint. It's not everybody, obviously, it's not the people in Mississippi. Well, maybe some, you know, but we have target markets, like Vermont. Vermont is the West Coast, is the East Coast version of white left folks who will, in Massachusetts, in Massachusetts, we'll have this conversation with you about their 300 acres that their grandfather owned.
This is how the receptacle of these funds, is it a cooperative or the receiver of these funds is not individual, it's cooperative or? I'm not interested in taking any personal funds for myself. I'm only interested in those land deals coming into a cooperative sense. I've negotiated a deal for a sister moving from one co-op into another kind of white-based co-op that she has a sister moving into your co-op, put her name on a lease so she don't have to do this whole, put her on a thing with you as an owner, and then she won't have to be moving from co-op to co-op. She got a piece of the land here with you, and then are you okay with that? Well, yeah, we're okay. All right, call the lawyer, get her name on the deed. Those type of conversations.
What would you say will be the strategy when you're not going up against agriculture? You're going up against just, so I'm from Pittsburgh. Some something that we're seeing is that we left the industrial revolution, we went into cannabis farming kind of aspect, and now we're moving into just build the whole city up like New York. So now I'm not battling against somebody who wants just land. They not only want land, they want to put a 10-story building up.
Yeah.
That
That's where the
I own a lot next door.
Yeah.
And then we know as far as farming, I need the sun, I need the.
Yep.
What is the strategy around that? Because there's, given the diaspora of Pittsburgh, there's 250 nonprofits, but there's a lot of money in Pittsburgh. Like, probably more money than a lot of other places in the country. So how do we strategize and convince those people, like, you don't necessarily need to do that. We got entire cities that are built based off of one person.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think, and I'll let Saki answer this.
I'm having Tourette's.
I feel she's a lot stronger ideologically than me in the question, but what I would say immediately, and I'm from Philadelphia and have done a lot of work in Pittsburgh, is our again, collective co-op bodies, our ability to be able to leverage any way, because I'm in a similar situation in Philadelphia with some building of some developers, and even going to Kenyatta, who's under investigation now, people to try to leverage that, to get them to stop, because that's what we have in the city in those questions, You got Reed Smith out there, so you might want to try to call him at some point, but.
Listen, we'll talk later.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Please.
So
Just about that question, I wanted to add, a big part of that is zoning.
Yeah.
So that's a problem that we're having.
Exactly.
Or zoning.
Yes.
Listen,
Yes.
Pittsburgh is.
Yeah.
We talk about a county with 209 municipalities.
They will shut you
down.
Massachusetts has 351.
Zoning. We not only are hearing zoning from the city level, but it's the municipality next door, plus the county, plus the state.
I was in Pittsburgh for the first time in my life, and it was a conference called Grounded Solutions. Grounded Solutions started off as the National Network Community Land Trust. I'm getting the N and all that wrong right now. Okay, nationally, there was this CLT national organization, and then there was this other housing organization, which is like fair housing and da-da-da-da. A foundation said, why don't you guys get together? And they come up with Grounded Solutions. And a lot of us in the CLT world were like, what does that mean? Grounded Solutions? So, woosah. The reason why I wanted to jump in real quick is because my quick answer is a community land trust. And our community land trust, when I read my bio, is the Fannie Lou Hamer Community Land Trust. Because we named it after Fannie Lou. She's from Mississippi. A lot of people know her as an activist and, civil rights and everything else. A lot of us don't know, and I didn't know, that she also was a part of the cooperative movement in Mississippi, right? So Freedom Farms, and there's a poster going around. Freedom Farms is one of our first co-ops that got off the ground. One, because of the necessity that we ascertained. Two, we're in the state of Mississippi, and although we're in Jackson, there's a long history of Black people coming from the Delta being there on the outskirts because they worked for white folks, growing food in their backyards, in their front yards, or wherever, right? So Freedom Farms is also, in a lot of ways, named in honor of Fannie Lou Hamer. And depending on who I'm talking to, I will say urban gardening, because Jackson is urban and it's urban gardening. We were very clear with our language from the very start, it's farming. And so that's Freedom Farms. And so the structure of Cooperation Jackson is that we have an LLC and we're a 501c3. We started off a lot sooner than we would have, and we started the LLC because in Mississippi, it is not legal to have a cooperative unless you're agriculture, a utility, or a credit union. And so we could either become an LLC, limited liability corporation, and be registered in Mississippi, or do what some other, very few, I can think of one, like the co-op grocery store, registered in Minnesota. And we decided to do the LLC because the Federation of Southern Cooperatives and the Mississippi Association of Cooperatives that got talked about during lunch had been working for a really long time, and they were getting kind of close to pushing for co-ops to be, any kind of co-op to be legal in Mississippi. Foundations and some people who are like, we support you and what you do, even if you are talking about, you know, dismantling the United States and capitalism, said they would give us money, and they gave us time before we started our 501c3. So that's the structure of Cooperation Jackson overall as the umbrella. So we have the Community Land Trust, and we're talking about cooperatives. Cooperative housing is really important. A community land trust can guarantee 99 years. 99 years sounds like a long time. From what I've seen, and it's not long, you're right, because there's no guarantee. My kids might be like, right. And for me at least, that's okay. I'm a link in the chain. And other people are like, why get involved? Because what do you mean 99 years? And what do you mean we collectively own the land, but the house on top isn't mine, especially in our community, right? So the Community Land Trust protects the land from folks who may be very well-intentioned flipping it. And at the same time, when you layer cooperative housing on a community land trust, from what I've seen from some examples in New York, Montreal, where else? Maybe some country in Europe. It does a lot better in guaranteeing the even further survival of the land being owned collectively. And, you know, like, something can change in 10 years, 25 years, 50 years, 99 years. If it's like 150 years, then even if you're not still alive, and even if my daughter and my son are like, I'm feeling it still, there's a cultural piece. And it becomes like, this is what we do. And then, you don't have control over it if someone sells out or not. So I wanted to say that Freedom Farms is now starting to be in a position, although there's ebbs and flows, of creating its own umbrella based on kind of like what we did before. And in Freedom Farms, it's hemp. Because what I said earlier was that it's, Oneal shared that in 2018, hemp was like legalized federally. And in Mississippi, they were saying, get your application in now. So we were prepared, we did that. We had people, not only the co-op, but we had each individual member of the co-op put in an application. Medical marijuana, I wrote down, can I finish this? Okay.
But you're going so far away, and I just was trying to understand, like, based on his question.
Yes.
You answered community land trust.
Yes.
How you would implement that to solve his problem, which is
It's,
you have an existing piece of land, but they're saying the land next to you, they're gonna build.
yeah, so there's all kinds of policy things that you can do. The reason why I skipped to this is because we're not asking them for anything, right? We can fight for community benefits, and then they can eminent domain you. I don't know if you all are if you understand that part, but like, so it's important to do the policy work. It's important to say, we need to make sure that housing is affordable. We need to make sure that renters have rights. I would say even they can build tenant unions, because unions have a history and have worked in the worker atmosphere. And in the tenant atmosphere. They are tenant unions. And at the same time, you could fight for it, you could get it, you could have the benefits, and then they have a contract with the city that says, yes, there's affordable housing, there's mixed income housing, and 10 years later, they no longer, because of their tax benefits, have to have the affordable part. So that's the reason why my shorthand, and feel free to talk to me about this anytime I'm here until the very last day. My shorthand answer to that is we need to use the current law that exists in this country around community land trusts to think about it as housing, and not only housing. For us, it's how do we take the land off a speculative market, make sure that our community can stay here and not be displaced or removed. And we can do that with this CLT, which is not the end-all be-all, just like co-ops aren't. for 99 years, right? And, matter of fact, the community land trust movement that started in the United States started in Albany. They don't say Albany, they call it Albany, Georgia. So the community land trust, the start of it, and the very first one was because folks were like, civil rights, yes, we've been a part of it. Racial justice, yes. We also need economic justice, and we need to be able to have land that covers all of what we need. So they spent a lot of time raising money. They were able to raise the money. They had a plan ahead of time with community around schools, around farming, how we feed ourselves, how we house ourselves, and that there are still a lot of community land trusts that have stuck to that core value and mission and try to keep doing it, especially ones who are grassroots organizing based, represented by their community center, those who are the most deeply impacted. And then the Community Land Trust Grounded Solutions Conference is scary because Fannie Mae and Bank of America and Chase were a part of the housing crisis, right? So, I feel like I'm going on and on. That was my direct answer. So in summary, community land trust and cooperative housing combined or not, depending on where you're at and what stage you're in. What's the long-term goal?
That's what you're addressing.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah.
I want to
There's,
you know, just, but
and time check, y'all.
But I guess just to piggyback on what she's saying, I mean, it's just so dangerous when you even look at the land bank, and I'm gonna give you an example of what's going on, particularly in the Point Breeze area. Now, they gave this particular white organization from within the land trust, sold them the land. So, well, even though it's supposed to be in the city, but it's some trickery going on. Because what they're doing is telling my neighbors to buy these houses for $150,000, but let's be clear, you don't own the land. So it is something within that contract that at any point they could come, and the law, and it's written in the law where they would have to give you whatever that value you paid for the house. Now, if you can show that you bought that house up, then they have to give you appropriate market rate. A lot of people are not reading the fine print, sweetie. Don't go for the okie dokie. Because one thing, they could go and make a lot of money in 10 years.
Is this Point Breeze land trust?
Yeah.
But to that being said, like, the land banking issue across Pennsylvania is happening in different ways.
Yeah.
And by council people, can
Well,
y'all, we got a Kenyatta.
Right, you got
organizations.
organizations.
We got Kenyatta.
Yeah, you got the organizations that's actually part of this here land trust. Even though it's a city entity, at least that's the understanding.
So I had a follow-up question that may answer that, but what's happening in Pittsburgh now is that public housing is being privatized. Is there a way to get a community land trust and then put affordable housing
Yeah.
Yes.
as a privatized?
Yes,
If you can,
Go ahead.
if you
I'm
can
sorry.
acquire, like, let's say there's a vacant lot, and you acquire it. Even if you don't have the money to build on it yet, you've acquired it, you put it in a community land trust, and, you know, you sit on it. Or maybe you make it productive by having kids, like, putting a basketball court on it, or doing urban gardening. One question that came up before is like, anywhere, like, we have to remediate the soil in our neighborhood because the whole block could be empty, but there was housing on it, there's glass on it, there's this and this, that on it. We also, you know, got really lucky when we acquired the first piece of property, which is like 3 parcels, and we didn't know it was that much, because the Mississippi Association of Cooperatives, along with the Ag Black College folks came and tested the soil, and it was ready to go. So, and then there's different ways for folks who know more about farming and everything to grow some sunflower seeds and do some other stuff and remediate the soil. And that may take some time. And the community needs to be, aware and, come into it fully like, yes, I'm down, because that might take 5 years, or it may take 6 in a market like, Pittsburgh, New York, wherever else. And then you might have people either collectively put the money together. There's an example in the Bay that is great. It's a little problematic. Or you may have Russell, who's like, I'm from Philly, Pennsylvania, and I have some money. We're gonna build a building.
One of the histories, a very political history in Philadelphia that we know some about, but not a lot in this context, to answer your question, is Cecil B. Moore's history, and there is a still personally owned by like a black family housing project in New York. It's owned by a black family, but it's funded by PH and Philadelphia Housing Authority, but it's owned by them. It's called Beckett Life. It's on 16th and what is that? Thompson, something like that, around the corner from Freedom Theater. But Beckett Life Center is a project.
In Brooklyn or Manhattan?
In Philadelphia.
Oh, in Philadelphia.
It's a project, but Cecil B. Moore back in the day lobbied it and lobbied the state just like they did with the tenant unions, but they also used the religious sector. So he had churches and he had poor people, the people who lived in houses, and he had the churches. And he said to the state that these people don't want to actually have to pay their rent to you as a collective. Yes, this is the housing. You as a state are supposed to provide X, Y, Z. All right, they're paying into it. They should get to own it. You shouldn't be able to kick them out and move them around and all of that. If they want this, and he negotiated that with the state of Pennsylvania and Philadelphia, where they still have the access under PHA.
So is that not under the federal entity? Because now, just like on 40th and Market, you see where did that. Now, on 40th, people didn't do that.
Yes, but they. Yes, of course you can take over the building.
I'm saying
Yes, in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, you can, and people have, but on the 40th Street,
that's what I'm saying.
That's apples and oranges from the Cecil B. Moore. One of the big questions, one of the major differences is the organizing in the community.
Yes. But also you have to look at our so-called elected officials who were supposed to be part like you and
I agree. I agree.
I feel like we need to understand how politics work.
I agree. But
committees.
I agree. Exactly. And what I experience and see historically, political education-wise, is that we don't understand and recognize the power and leverage of the people that Cecil B. Moore had at that moment to be able to make the state, because he had enough people, he had enough leverage, he had church, he had the hood, he had enough people to say, y'all gotta break this up, we gotta get this up.
So we can't get into the nonprofit industrial complex where we're like, oh, I'm gonna keep raising this money, and anyway. And then at a certain point, I have to hear folks say, well, we should be making $75,000. Yes, you should. What does that mean for other things?
Sure.
So like, shoulda, coulda, woulda. If you want to organize yourself out of a job, that's what I was taught that we're supposed to do.
Right.
Personally, through my training, and then at the same time, I'm like struggling with 30 and 20-year-olds, and even some folks who have been doing housing for longer than me in Miami and took over some buildings and was like, no, you're not going to kick this family out. We're just going to camp out here. What do we deserve? What are we owed? How much is an ED making over here? Can we ever be paid our actual worth? No. Do we want to keep being in this cycle and a rat race, not only of capitalism, but of nonprofit, and be like, and so I feel you on so many levels, and we need for folks like you to be saying what you're saying all the time, and then even if you haven't experienced it, and you're like, now is the time to elect the left wing
wing of the Democratic Party, maybe to stop like some of the bleeding and the Band-Aid. Is that going to free black people? If it didn't work in 3 different rounds before, is it
going to guarantee housing?
And
Is it
I'm
going to
talking to
guarantee
you,
safety?
right?
Is it going to guarantee?
And I'm talking to you from Jackson, Mississippi, and part of the reason why I left Atlanta to actually live in Jackson is because Baba Shokwe became mayor after city council and nobody thought he would win, but then unfortunately he died.
Wow.
Right? And is his son living up to what his father wanted in his legacy, or what he said
No,
at that
I'll
moment?
say it, no.
No, he did get elected again, and at the same time, like, can you step into that in the inside-outside game? Can you step into becoming president of the empire
In defense
and
of
be
him.
like, okay, I'm gonna live up to this? So I'm partially defending him, not defending him.
Right.
He stepped into the city.
I said that, not in your voice. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I mean, I'll say it too. I'm
So
saying
you trying to
everything.
help system.
I'm not. Everything is not black and white.
Right.
So he's stepping into a city that is broke. He's stepping into a city that wants to be taken back over by white folks because Jackson was majority white, and then they started fleeing. And there's limits. Earlier I said the state itself. We live in the South, and in Mississippi, we live in a place where you could have a progressive city, you could have a radical town, county, because black people are like, we've been farming, we know what this is like. And the state of Mississippi can intercede either before, during, or after to say, no, you can't. And they're like, the federal government who? Okay, let the federal government do it, and we'll, keep them in court for the next 10 years. So electoral politics has a place, and at the same time, please don't say you're about to be the most radical city in the United States when you are like in your first year. Because what does radical mean? And then when you start shifting your language and your practice to the point where your practice no longer meets up with your language, then you gotta help. And if we have enough people to be like, no, we don't have a system where we can kick them off the stool, but we do have the continuously organizing, having the base building and being like, we're not electing you because you're black because we have to choose between Republican and Democrat. Right?
But we have to do more than
Me
like
too.
organize to the black, and then,
I can give you an example, like what you went
And
about
no,
in
he's not living up to
2012. Residents in North Philly on 22nd and Jefferson, I'm part of the Philly Peace Park, we said, we're gonna take the vacant land and we're gonna clean it and we're gonna do what we need to do. Now, this was PHA owned land. And the community said, you are not taking care of this place, it's trash, you're okay with it being trash, you're okay with people's wellness being messed up because when you come out of the house, when you see it's trash, you see needles, you see people prostituting some and everything else. So, it was a big conflict. So you gotta be prepared for conflict. It was a big conflict, and what they did was, they even put fences up, community tore it down. What they said was, we will swap the land with you. Now, mind you, they're saying that you're squatters, you don't own this, you don't have rights. But now you're saying you will swap the land to go right around the corner where it's larger at. We said, we had to think about it. A lot of times, I think that as freedom fighters, sometimes we want to take the loss without gaining anything or thinking about the community. So for us, some people was like, no, let's not do it. Like, let's just keep battling. You don't have enough weapons. You don't have this and that. That's another story. And you don't win. All we know is being victims and losers. So we swapped. And now, right, it's been 10 years. They told us, well, 13 parcels we want to give you the deed for that we've been fighting. And mind you, they raided. We took over 2 houses on the block. Our office and community space because we deserve it. We grow food on the land. We have children programs, and now we're building a STEM pavilion. So it can be done. If you in the community say, this is what we're going to do, like for years, it was a conflict, it was a fight. Now they're like, hey, can we work with you guys to build a larger landscape for the block? Because we call it Peace Town. Us taking over, this is what we want to see for our people. We're not doing the drugs, we're not having women trafficking, we're not dealing with prostitution, we're growing food. And we don't call it a co-op, but that's what it is. And when we tell other people that don't have any other ethnicities and even us, come work the
Do you know how much the value of the land is worth now compared to when they first said, oh yeah, well, let's swap?
It went up.
Yeah.
It went up. I don't remember exactly, but it went up because everything, first they said this is eminent domain.
Right.
So one of the other struggles we in, there's a older man whose great grandfather built the building and stuff. He has like a garage, and it's been here for 90 years. And y'all want to displace him? Absolutely not. So what I'm getting at is that you don't have to have the money, right, to start something. You don't have to have that. You have to have good intention, love, and will. You have to have the hands of the people. And then from there, you continue to grow. We didn't start out as a 501 and everything else, like legitimized. We were, and because we were trying to be like, we're on our thing.
There's a reason to do that. There's a reason to do that.
We were like, no systems, no title, no nothing. Until we had to try to like, as you grow, the funding has to come. So then we went under like a subculture thing, but now we're finally like, okay, let's do our land trust. We are already in the process of that. We do have the 501, but it's 10 years now. And we made a point to them.
And after watching this process, again, the biggest part of this story is organizing the community. That's why the city is coming back and saying because they can't do anything with that piece of
it was for black people specifically.
But she's smart because they have more of a community.
And we did it in West Philly too.
Where we're at.
Where at? North
West
Philly?
Philly.
You talking about North Philly?
So,
I know I've been involved.
The people in community, cause like, we talk about electoral politics, sometimes we organize it, then we elect somebody. And then we think, well, our job is done. Oh, we do the work, and they're mad when they don't do the work. I'm like, well, but if you keep showing up and helping them fight all that they have to fight,
and hold them
you'll
down.
get at least.
Everybody has to be
go back home and
So I got a
That's a
question
beautiful story.
as far as affiliating people, because another thing, I mean, aside from politics and just people in general, another thing that Pittsburgh battles against is the huge, I won't say huge, but there's an environmental thing where land is sliding and moving and shifting all over the place. So you could build something here. You might end up down the river. So with that being said, but also with that being said, the county, given such a huge county and so many municipalities, you have, well, these are our set of laws, and these are our set of laws. And then you got two municipalities that don't, they don't talk. They broke, we got money over here, Pittsburgh, like, and now it's like, we wanna take over, we don't want y'all, it's that constant battle of like, well, who's, but more importantly, the environmental part of it, where I live in probably one of the flattest parts of the city. Very slow to be developed, but now because it is the flattest part of the city.
People wanna live, work, and play.
Want it, but they.
You guys got
Where? So eminent domain doesn't even protect, and we had a older sis say this over and over again. Hold on real quick.
Oh, in the last 5 years, Google, American Eagle.
The eminent domain, because of the structure, the deep structure of this country, doesn't guarantee a community land trust either.
Right.
So constantly, folks are like, and even within ours, when we were getting into it, and we were at different stages of understanding and knowing it. The sisters like been there, done that, was in Chicago, and then she was really excited about the fact that like this guarantees this guarantees this, this guarantees that, and then someone was like, and I was like, ooh yeah, there's one that doesn't, eminent domain. And what can protect you from that is what we're talking about. It's like
What's that?
It's what we're talking about.
Which is
If the city or the state came in and they were like, we're gonna eminent domain this one part right here because where we are. Right. So then the community, if you have enough people, they're like, yeah, no, you're not. And there's an example of this in New Mexico. I'm saying at the end of the day, there's no guarantee. If they want to do it, they'll take it, and that's what it is. And what I'm saying is, if you practice direct action, which does and has worked, and you have been building or you're trying to build, like community and base building, I feel like in year 8, there are a lot of people who, within a few blocks of us, don't know who we are. There are people who are like, oh yeah, that's great, y'all are doing good work. Oh, now I see food, or now I don't see food, or now I see this shopping closet that you have. I feel like I would say I'm like 90% sure if there was a fight, then folks would be like, we're ready.
Yeah, that's how.
So the only
And so what I'm saying is, if you're a nuisance enough, then they back off. Depending on how much the worth of the value, like the land, they may not. But if we don't have that base and we're not building that base to be ready for 100 or 1,000 people by the time they come to take their shit, then you're
even with the numbers, I'm just thinking, because how America operates, we need to get somebody that's all they do is read all the damn contracts of the laws that these people put in place, because you have to look at the etymology of white folks. It changes within sentences. I mean, I look at words that meant that.
Not just them.
Oh, they trigger.
Yeah.
No, come on, because they weren't supposed to discover language, but we know they did.
Yeah.
But anyway.
They practiced on themselves in Europe first, and they were really
the only reason
each other, and then they expanded it.
I have to strongly disagree with that is
Yes.
because if you're familiar with Pittsburgh and the Lower Hill, the community, there's to this day, they're arguing from community agreements that were made before I was born.
Right.
And that land is still being.
And that's one, I don't disagree with you at all. I don't know. I was in Pittsburgh. I heard a lot about different things, and we were shown some CLT, and to me it was a little tokenism looking.
Yeah.
At the same time, that's why I said it's not the race is not like, I said a little while ago, it's not like a sprint, right? Like, I'm okay, and I was okay 30 years ago with not seeing it in my lifetime. And we often talk about generations, and then we limit ourselves to like maybe 3.
That's interesting.
And so, because because of like who I was named after, and some other things, when I also think about generations, I think about 7 generations. Like, that is, long term. And at the same time, for whatever reason, when we were talking about vision and everything in Corporation Jackson and having meetings, and people are like, well, what do you think in 5 years? Close your eyes and think about 20 years. My mind is constantly at 50.
Wow.
And so now that we're at 8 years, I'm still thinking 50. 58 years. What do we want to see? What do we want to do? And it can take that long. Clearly, you're saying before you were born, folks are doing this, but the infighting and everything also contributes to the fact that the place is still in the same, situation. So I don't.
Who's using the land right now? Who owns it? This land in question, you don't know.
The city of Pittsburgh, the URA, the Penguin.
Oh, you listen, you're.
Now, First National Bank.
Yes.
There's a constant exchange, and I guess to what I was asking you, to where we've been fighting over this Lower Hill portion.
I noticed.
Little Harlem. I don't think it's worth it anymore.
There you go.
Okay, well,
So you could just have
things they did really, like, if y'all want the land, they really started using it.
They came and I'm like, yo, we got this whole other county of 102, y'all fighting over this section of.
But not necessarily fight, you just use it. Like, there wasn't like a, let me get the title, let me get the thing. Like, this is not something that I don't think anybody can condone legally, but you just use the land.
So are you talking about internally with like black people?
And then it's yours.
Oh, they do it. They do it.
They're gonna come, 'cause they got the kids
from Baltimore in the room?
I'm not from Baltimore, but Baltimore was doing it like that for like
No Baltimore, no Baltimore in the
10, 15
room.
years ago. I'm sorry to say it.
I'm from New York, I go back and forth,
Baltimore.
but, in West Baltimore, they're tearing down a lot of the houses, old houses,
Yeah.
and they're just tearing down blocks. It's very,
Are they
it's
condemning?
very
it?
ugly.
Mm-hmm.
The whole, I mean, West Baltimore, especially where I live.
So are you living in Baltimore now? You're from New York, but you're living in Baltimore now?
Other local places.
Oh, okay, okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Yeah.
But it's so much potential there.
Yeah.
So we don't have a whole lot of people in that area, but there's so much potential. I'm thinking about how can I help to develop a co-op, and I'm just
Yeah.
like.
Let's talk.
Yeah, let's talk because
Oh, I was
there,
gonna say,
yes, there are people who are actually interested in it. There are people who are saying, what's up with Baltimore and those blocks that they're tearing down? How can we get down there? And,
And so I'm saying, like, make sure that we speak before, like, Thursday. And, my homegirl, who's been best friends since freshman year, is the reason why I got to, like, know and see Baltimore, being in Baltimore County. And she would be interested, I think, in having that conversation, because, yeah, that's, like, her family and she's here, she stayed, and she wants to contribute to that. And I know a couple other people who also, would, wanna do that, including another, friend from college who was a year ahead of me, and he was determined to stay here too. And so he studied like urban development, planning, whatever, and then he did get into government, and then he left, they yeah, and then he left, and so he's always like family here still. Matter of fact, he's about to be in New Orleans in some kind of government position too. But he would be interested, and I got to talk to and reconnect with him recently. So I do want to talk about it because then I can also share who I know here that could be a resource and who you probably want to stay away from because they are well-intentioned CLT people who have drank the Kool-Aid and they're interracial and interclass, whatever.
one of the things,
But taking over those buildings, the opportunity is being able to like take over them in different ways and different tactics, little by little, because basically it's like being ignored, being abandoned, and even, you know, the generation of like the last, let me see, me, 2 generations have said, okay, well, we're gone, we're abandoning them, right? I can go to church there, and after a while, the church is like, we raised some money and now we're somewhere else. So definitely wanna.
one of the things I want to throw out to all of you here is just that we're in a evolutionary type of period, and I remember us organizing different ways than we organize now. This is piggybacking on the youth part in the context of people used to say, oh, you go out, you do this, or you march, or you rally, or whatever, and we still do those things too. But because of technology, because of spiritual evolution and growth, because of just our political education and things like that, the way that we engage people, the way that we get to know them about it is different. It's just different now. And we need to take that into consideration, you know, because it feels like in a lot of ways, we still got some of that old tail on us of the way we used to have to organize, but organizing has changed so much. Like we here at this place in Baltimore, meeting and talking about whole streets in, you know, Baltimore, so we have to kind of upgrade. And cannabis. Oh, and cannabis, right? And so, you know, it screams to me and has been screaming to me for a little bit now that we need to upgrade what it is that we're doing, how we're doing it. And I love during COVID and the George Floyd rebellion that we have organically become closer. We've also organically have upped our internal services that we've had internally. We had internal services where we would feed you, we would clothe you, but somehow, the rebellion brought it all back out, you know?
The Panthers. Look at the program.
There was always
And the
food at
food,
every
and then with it, everybody do these new groups for funding, and when COVID came, a lot of people was not out serving. And we said we still gonna continue to do food, we upped it, which means we need more farmers so we can get food and buy from each other and not have to go to some of the junctions that don't benefit our community. But they got all these funds, and then they had a bunch of food and didn't know what to do with it.
And they didn't even know how to give it away.
Well, they
didn't know how.
stopped the program. They stopped the school lunch program. Like, it's gone this end of this year.
Where?
And they're not gonna.
Everywhere.
They were giving out school lunch when the schools were closed. They were
No,
providing.
in Philly, they have locations, but there is a federal bill to remove the federally funded school lunch program. Right now, they're talking about it.
That's how some children.
Wait. Hold on. I got a question. Because they also just passed the federal bill, and I'm a sheriff by trade. I study this. One of the things that they didn't, what some people don't know, is that the dollar amount to feed a child per day was like $1.35, but they just raised it to a little bit over $3. That just happened. So for them to say that now they want to get rid of it,
It's interesting too how that, whatever percentage, $1 to $3, right, but how it's built actually, and I've worked similar areas, how it's built into the old food pyramid, and you get some milk, and you get a piece of cheese, and you get a piece of bread, and you get some tomato, and you got a veggie, everything, and a piece of pizza.
so they make, what I think they forget,
And you did the whole
they
food
might
chart.
be reverting a lot of that money back into SNAP. Because the school lunch and a SNAP is,
Connected.
Well, I got a problem, because I can't get a snack thing.
Well,
I got a problem. I'm working 3-4 jobs,
So-
and when I fall
so
on a
if
job,
you-
I need a snack.
If you look at SNAP benefits, they're not meant for, they're meant for children and women.
The kids ain't even in.
And senior citizens.
Then I need to be the police and go and make sure that hussy feeds her kids. Cause don't get me started.
So what they'll probably do is they'll split that money in between how are we gonna help the children and how are we gonna help in Pennsylvania.
Wait a minute,
The same
in
system.
Pennsylvania, what they was doing, each child had their own access card. And then, well, I was trying to figure out, can I get a whole card, because I just wanted some. Every kid in the household had an access
Only
card.
school age though.
I don't care.
That's important though.
What I'm saying,
You know why
I
that's important? Because Pennsylvania also has some of the lowest rate of early childhood
need to eat
education.
so I can keep up the
So,
fight.
and maternity rate is high.
You do.
So
Well,
when you
you're
get
not
into,
mortality,
when you get into school age and why you can only feed school age children, that's a problem.
Go ahead.
Three tier. It's gonna be, I'm just looking at it, it's gonna be three, I'm a teacher, so it's gonna be 3 tiered. So it's gonna be some kids absolutely free. It's gonna be based on income again. Before, it used to be based on income a long time ago. So basically, the working family, even those single parent homes, their kids, they're not gonna be eligible.
Got it, so it's income based.
So they're getting rid of the free.
They got rid of universal free lunch.
Gotcha. That's because they don't have an accurate definition of what food insecurity is. Just because I live next to a grocery store doesn't mean that.
At all.
When Oneal was talking about hemp, and being able to provide insulation, like right before that when we were chatting, I talked about, it also being able to, like, not hemp, but mushrooms being able to provide, make the insulation, I guess with or without hemp, be fire retardant, what's the one that doesn't burn it off? Resistant, okay, thank you. Fire resistant. And although I can't pull up any pictures and all that now, we were talking about it, and I was like, oh, let's save it for this. And then we didn't get to talk about it. So imagine the picture that you showed.
Evocative, and I think that you're explaining their product.
I don't know about the company because a lot of companies are like, oh, let's do this, and that's
Many
kind of
people with
like,
mushrooms.
I don't know.
Yeah, these guys are legit.
So, okay, cool.
Yeah.
If you say they're legit,
They're legit.
I believe you and trust you.
I'm looking them up.
In
Yeah.
in the fabrication laboratory world, and also the intersection between technology like 3D printing and other things, and agriculture, and the idea, at least in Barcelona, which is not the Basque area with Margagon, but they still have the Catalan independence movement there.
Right.
There's a group, I guess they have a company, they actually have a sliding scale, because they have companies like Nike being like, well, if so-and-so can design their own shoe, then what do I do? And 3D print your own shoe, and then you have a makerspace where you get creative and do whatever, what do I do? Their sliding scale is like, okay, so-and-so, you wanna come learn, do some training, fine, pay this. People in the surrounding neighborhood, in the area, youth, the whole range, can go learn about cooking, picking it from the garden, and then also using whatever waste is generated. Like, you might wanna eat some mushrooms, you might wanna make sure that you're going through different kind of mushrooms, and that combined with, oh, I'm remembering, that combined with cardboard
Yes.
creates this really hard material. And using that in communities that we're talking about don't even have something to be able to, like, let's do something in between. We're talking about like somewhere in Haiti or somewhere in Cape Town where the shanty towns, the naturally emerging, we have to be somewhere, so we're creating something, and then a flood comes or a fire comes and they're done. They know how to do it, but then they also may need to connect with this fabrication, national, international group to say, we need this. And through that network, which is like open source, so to speak, you download the design, you have someone like Oneal say, I can come and teach you train you, do an exchange for like a week to know the difference between shiitake mushroom and, what's the name of the other one?
Oh, there's hundreds.
What?
No, I mean the one that we're talking about to use for,
China?
the one we're talking about, like you showed a picture of.
Yeah, that's the mycelium.
Mycelium,
Yeah,
okay.
so that-
I'm just using mycelium as
Okay,
another
all right,
example.
nice,
And now, people who are like, we're gonna build over here because this has been swept away by flood, and we don't care if your property is $1 million, we're still gonna build here because we need to, can make sure that they're fireproof and still do it for, I don't know, $5, a whole like block. Because that's the exchange rate and value of like what the dollar is in South Africa or Haiti or Brazil. And we can be like, oh, okay. I'm saying we as in Cooperation Jackson because we have the Fab Lab right now.
What is the Fab Lab?
The fabrication laboratory. And the
what's in that?
fabrication
What makes a Fab Lab a Fab Lab?
You actually have to, in order to be like a Fab Lab, you have to go through the international process, and it's open, and I mean, it does cost money, but like once you get certified, you can say like, I'm a fabrication laboratory in this way. But you could also.
What do you use to fabricate?
So right now, okay, for example, we did start having right away in March of 2020 sewn masks because we had people who could do that.
Sorry, what?
Sewn masks, like the one that I'm wearing right now, and we distributed those. We also had one of the anchors doing 3D printed masks, and they were reserved for frontline workers. And he got the blueprint from, I'm not sure which European country, and then he had to play around with it a little bit and tailor it. And so, however, maybe like 3 to 4 months later, Josh, who's a member, his mom is a nurse. She tried it, and she was like, I'm testing it out. And by then, she was able to like go on Facebook and say, you know, this is this and this is that. And then we could talk about how much it costs to print, which was pretty simple. The
fabrication laboratory, and going back to what Russell said, the means of production, owning the means of production, is one part of the community production center. And so we were able
But I asked
to,
all of that because I've never
because you know
been
that,
in
or?
a 3D printing laboratory where they got 3D machines lined
Oh,
up.
yeah,
and you
you
just
were.
3D it up, you know, and
Yeah.
that type of fab lab. But
And so
I've
we're,
never been in that type of situation.
you were in the meeting, and.
No, but I'm saying,
Oh,
no, I'm
okay.
saying prior to
Right,
being
okay,
in the
okay,
meeting,
okay.
I had never been in a fab lab.
Couple
You
months
said,
ago.
"All right, fab lab," and I was
Yeah,
like,
right. And so, and then the thing is, it's like, it's not only 3D printing, it's precision cutting. So you can precision cut some wood, like Japanese samurai style, and not use a nail. And so there's still the importance of having people who have the skills on traditional construction to continue doing it and have work and hopefully pass it down. And those two things can be combined. And then there are maker spaces that are similar. A maker space is kind of like, think about, it's a co-op. Corporation Jackson has a space. We've spent the money to have the technology. Now you can be a member, and you can be an artist and come and print some t-shirts. You could be a farmer and say, let me experiment with these two,
I've 3D printed.
you know, whatever.
Irrigation.
And nice.
Oh, yeah.
And for us, the interconnectedness has been a goal. So the cooperatives creating their own kind of like link and chain, and not having to rely eventually, hopefully, on the outside market, but then being able to learn how to run a business and, you know, sell your greens to Whole Foods, which we do have in Jackson. And then during hard times, you know, you might have a freeze, but at least we're growing enough food to feed ourselves as members and maybe a 5-block radius, and that food is being collected and about to like really start being collected for some fees to be composted, and more and more we're getting closer and closer to our zero waste goal. And our zero waste goal internally is like, this is what we know we need to do, and we're gonna be like, oh yeah, by the way, Jackson, how about we have a zero waste goal for 2030, and we're still gonna push that policy because we know that it provides some layer of protection, and then it also can be rolled back like 20 years later. So, but hopefully by 20 years, the idea of mutual aid is still growing, and when we think about mutual aid, we're not like, let's go spend, this is true too, let's go spend like a couple of G's at Costco's and Lowe's so that we could take material down to New Orleans during Ida relief. We still were having to buy food. We still were having to buy multiple things. But if we can be the part where we're like, we have the grains, we have the 3D printing, where we can be like, well, I don't know, print the pieces that go into a generator, and folks who know how to do their own, like literally create a generator, create a low power FM antenna, then you're starting to be able to be closer to being self-sufficient in a way that we know not only sounds good and is getting back to like the good old days for Black people during segregation, is both, and it's like, shit is getting worse. We know they didn't care. We know at the same time, like, we have the bourgeois of Black people who are like, well, we might want to side on this side, right? And then we have, in the last 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, we've had school canceled and gone to virtual because of severe weather. And a couple of days ago, there was hail and then nothing. And then the week before, there was a tornado that like landed in southwest Jackson and then went around this way to North Jackson. And the time before that, when they canceled school, New Orleans, hurricanes, not tornadoes. New Orleans got hit and we didn't. You hear me? New Orleans got hit.
That whole alley right there?
It may be doing that at 11 a.m. and then by 1 o'clock it's sunny outside. So
right, but Jackson is Hurricane Alley. Jackson's not like hurricane. season is over for right now. The tornado that my dad was like, is it impacting you? I was like, it looked like it was gonna rain. It's been sunny all day. I wish they had gone to school. And then we find out that a tornado hit, I think it was like the 7th ward.
I didn't even know.
Yeah,
So it's
I'll
like,
keep more snow.
Yeah,
I've been complaining about the snow
Yeah.
for all these years. I don't want none
so
of that.
the emergency preparedness that we know and have at least been able to have the skills to do through folks like Kali, who parallels Russell in a lot of ways because he grew up in this movement, and also a former Marine who's now teaching in high school, who did a series of trainings for us internally, and then we had community open, come get trained, and then if you stick around, you could get some equipment, not that well attended, and then
Learning never is.
yeah, and then at the same time, like, if 5 people are like, yes, I'm down, and I promise I'll use this equipment in this way, then when shit hits the fan, what's supposed to happen is that their house or their whatever is the hub, so that then people can have some place to go, you know, ahead of time. And, yeah, I'm shaking my head because, yeah, it's really real. And that is what to expect. I'm like, oh my God, I didn't know the federal government was doing this. And at the same time, if I was talking the way I was earlier, I was like, oh, Mississippi, of course, you're gonna be the first one. But during this whole like severe weather, little by little, each time they had food available for lunch and breakfast. School didn't start till 9 when they called it early, like the day ahead, because they were doing, you could pick up breakfast and lunch from 7 to 8 to 8:30, and then school was gonna start at 9. Do we need that? Are we still in the like eligibility? Yes, we are, because of being in the Jackson Public School, and you know, they get food from lunch. Did we have time and capacity, and could we have some of our own food? Yes. And if that meant that more people, or they would have enough food so that the mom rolled through and was like, oh, actually we have a house full of 5, then it's kind of like that kind of system there. They would be like, oh yeah, we have 20 more, and we know we only have, you know, however much time. They would have been like, here you go, however many you need. And so sometimes we step back and we're like, we could be at the center and not our house because electricity went out, and we do have food, so we're gonna let who needs that have it. And the government is trying to figure that shit out, and it doesn't always work. And then it's it's like, yeah, you got it completely wrong, and now what you thought you were trying to do is not working. But we have to, I think, not get stuck and be okay and have more information than, you know, sis over here who's a teacher looking up like, yeah, get ready. Because at least from our perspective, you know, the US is in the position of like Rome when it was like finally really, really crumbling. And it's being backed up against the wall and being like, oh yeah, talking shit to Russia, and Russia's like, yeah, whatever, and everybody's really worried about China.
You said we're a third world country?
Not yet. Not yet.
Yeah, we can't say that because I can't say that. I don't say that because I actually like, because it doesn't compare to like Haiti right now. So I'm careful with it. And so at the same time, the South, yes, exactly, and in Mississippi. So when we talk in different places and spaces, and we're in international spaces, we talk about the relationship between the South and even, you know, people of color, whatever, non-Europeans, and the global South, right? Because we're clear in international spaces, even if we don't speak the same language, there is definitely an alliance, and
our lifestyle.
Our work here, if that relieves you to have enough space to be like, oh hell no, fam, then that's what we need to do. We're in the belly of the beast. And so that's I'm explaining the reason why I was like, because it's yes and then if you're talking to someone in Brazil and they're like, really? There's no running water? in parts of Mississippi today, then I can be like, yes.
Yeah.
When I say
So this
there's
is
a South local South
this
connection,
is just practice for the
yes.
rest of the week.
Bathroom in the
Yes.
ground?
Yeah.
Training
And all
ground.
of that.
I mean, and yeah, the
Depending on
training
where you
ground
are,
is,
it's a training ground.
But
Yeah.
that's learning about even
The
off
basics.
grid, cause part of what we do,
Yeah.
what we got going on is
Yeah.
like, you're not gonna stop us from surviving. So
Yes.
solar panels, hitting that one in school too, but around for electricity, we have solar, solar balls and different things. Then you have the pumps that you use that you put water in, so you can, like, composting, you know, you're talking,
Yeah.
like, we have to get in that mind state and we have to connect, that's been our biggest thing, connecting the north with the south as well, making sure like we have our alliances that we together. Cause for some of us, when the pandemic hit and then the virus was about to come, we was like, shut it down,
Yeah,
dismantle
shut
this
it down.
damn system. And I was like, yeah, and then all of a sudden the stimulus came and then we went back to sleep. So it was like, alright, we're not ready yet, but it lets us know that we are needed. The people that's on the ground that's connecting and doing this stuff and growing food for community, we're needed. So I wanted to ask you, something that was on my mind about the hemp was, can you create a hemp raised bed for food?
Out of hemp materials?
Yes.
I feel like they use hemp in shipping. It's strong. Can you do that?
Yeah,
Can you
you
do
just
like
have,
a pot?
you gotta make it like
Well,
that.
I
Mix
mean,
it
like,
up.
okay, to grow food.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, cause I'm
It would
thinking
just
like.
be like the way you use wood.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, cause I'm thinking like, they got like the Green New Deal, they talk about sustainability, all of these things. We would love to have some to because what we learned with taking over stuff is all about incorporating new design, incorporating demonstrating. So now everything is valuable, and we all talk about going green and eco and this and that, so now you have a whole nother base of people that's willing to support. Then you bring in the gardeners that's willing to support, so this strategy is supposed to be about how to create this equity and generational wealth and helping us until we can, you know, this means or whatever. But for right now, there are things we have to do that can last, so that, I mean, play around with that idea.
Yeah.
Because a park like ours, like, we would love to showcase that, you know, showing people like, hey, you know, this is something that's dope.
Yeah.
I mean, here, you got your home decor here, but you can come here and you can experience this and.
And it's okay if it goes back for some reason and it's like breaks down over 10 years with rain and whatnot, right? Because
less
then it
than
ends up
that.
being.
In rain, it'll break down.
You
Less than a
expect
year.
your raised bed to.
Yeah, and I'm saying that's okay
And that's
because like
a problem.
home
But,
depot
well, no,
wood.
green-
No, it doesn't have to be.
is-
Because we
No,
can
it
do it
doesn't
for
have
our
to be.
greenhouse.
You expect your raised bed to break down.
You know,
at some point in time.
right.
All I'm saying is that that's okay because a raised bed, if you're buying treated wood, is different than hemp and breaking down and composting the ground and
Yeah, I
starting
love
over.
that. I love
That's all.
that can work for me for sure.
That's all I'm saying.
We want to go quickly, but we want to also ask if there are any other questions, concerns, any issues, anything that you want to say, any announcements, anything like that. But also myself and Saki are also available to speak to you personally if, you know, if you're still, that's her email, I'll post mine, rshoatz@gmail. But,
I got something. You said something earlier about figuring out how to collectively change. And though I love this setting, this conference, I think more conferences should be about doing the work. Because we come and talk about it a lot, at least once every year. This is conference number 1 for me this year. But I wonder, I'm curious to know how many conferences I'll be going to actually put in some sweat equity.
So for me, I know a lot of times it's not built in. So that's why I was saying it in a way that was probably coded in my crazy head. But when I was saying earlier, like, the organizing is changing, that's what I was talking about. Because I'm here, like, I don't want to leave here without having an intimate connection to you for Pittsburgh and possibly a project. You know, like, let's agree on a project. Let's, you know, so for this brother, I've been waiting to meet him for, you know what I mean? So I've seen his stuff now I already in the back of my head, I already know what I gotta do, what my homework is, just for him, not for nothing on my end, nothing for me to gain or nothing on my end. I'm gonna win all off of spreading this information. You know, I'm gonna win off of that, that's where my
my win is gonna come in at. But I needed to see, grasp it, all of that, and now I wanna get up underneath it and where I can, you know, and push it up in my zones, in my ways where I'm strong at, you know, where I see that I think I can help it at, you know. And so here in general, I know that there are financiers. I know that there was a sister here in the red that was saying, hey, you know, like we need to cut that. We need to find that space for her. You know, we need to find a space for black investors that are coming with capital to say, I don't know all of the stuff that's talking about. All this
So
stuff.
your answer is, come up with a project. Align with the project that you
I
did.
came here with like 3.
That's the way, that's the only way it is.
I wanna hear it. I wanna get
This is
it
my
done.
4th conference talking about this, and more and more people are more and more engaged about it, when I know, when we go and launch this concept, it's gonna be well received. And it's gonna be people coming from all over the place. That attorney right there, the business owners, farmers, chefs, you know what I mean? So it might take a minute, but
It might take a minute.
there is the snow, it is going, but you know, change is hard. You know, getting people to understand this big concept and then get behind it.
And then get behind it.
It ain't, people don't get behind something unless it's their idea. So you gotta push your idea to a point where they feel it's their idea, and then they're on board with you.
That's my idea. That stuff he was running, when I seen it, I was like, oh, that's mine. Like, I immediately was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get the talking points to all of that. I was like, I'm gonna get up and learn all of that. That's mine. I was like, that? Oh yeah, I need that in my mental role. That's where I need that.
You know what you said that was key to us was people will show up when there is chaos. Like I promise you, when they seen that it was like they tried to raid our houses and 3 of us came up. It was me, my husband, it was our other friend who had a baby with her though. We like, yo, what you doing? Like you trying to bring this up?
Okay, cool.
Flash drive.
No,
And
was it
a
your flash
neighbor
drive?
had a picture from like the top from a building, and it looked terrible. Right? The whole rate fell apart. It fell apart. Well, first of all, because he was going to take other action, but it fell apart, and the people from PHA came. One of the top people, it was apologizing to us and said, we want to talk to y'all. So sometimes it's 3 to 5 people that's running or that's doing stuff, but we're consistent and we're about it. So you would be one of the core leaders that's going to maintain whatever